Welcome to the webinar. Today we're going to talk about department and group best practices. So one of the most fundamental parts of the LMS, pretty important, and something you definitely want to give some thought to when you're getting set up. So we're going to walk through some ideas and definitions on how we think best to do it and what some of the terms mean. That's me, Client Success Team Lead, and I'll be leading the webinar today. Quick little agenda. We're just going to start with the intro and then we'll do a little bit of a demonstration as well as we talk through things. We can see how things look in the LMS. And at the end, we'll answer some questions. So I also have some of the other CSMs from Absorb with me. Jameson and Jordan are both chained to their desks and ready to answer your questions. So feel free to answer questions throughout. We will chat with you in the text chat, but we'll also do a Q&A review at the end. A little bit of housekeeping just about how GoToWebinar works. You can chat with our support members, as I mentioned, so simply type stuff in the chat there and you can send questions to staff. You can ask questions and we will answer them at the end in the Q&A portion, and we will be uploading the recording of this Prezi as well. So let's delve right into it. Departments, one of the most important structures in the LMS. They're the foundation from which you will manage your users. So pretty darn important that we set these up in a way that can keep things organized and you can understand for your organization. Departments are a required field for each user, so every user in the system needs to belong to a department. Again, underlining how important they are. They're also how we define user management. So the admins and their ability to report on people in the LMS is informed from their department structure. So what your admins can see, who they can report on, that type of thing can all be set up using departments, as well as obviously access to courses, all kinds of things. So a little bit of background on how departments work. They use a parent-child relationship. So I'm sure most people are generally familiar with how that works, but just thought we would explain it just in case here. And so there's a little diagram showing you how that works. So how it works, you have a top level, which in this case being Department A, and that's the parent department for all departments below. And then it branches off underneath that into the various trees. So Department B, which can have its own sub-departments under that. So Department E is a child of Department B, and then Department C branches off and it can have its own children and so on and so forth. So that structure can tree out however you'd like, but that's kind of a basic gist of how it works. So next up, we'll show you some hierarchy examples. And these are some common ways that departments can be set up in the system. So obviously, department, the word itself often relates to how corporations and businesses define their structure. So that's one of the most common ways that we'll see to set up departments in the system is according to your corporate structure, your business hierarchy, your org chart, that kind of thing. So this is the example we have here. We've got the very top level department being the business or the corporation, the company, and then we break that into larger subgroups. So finance, compliance, operations, and business development, sales, just some examples there. And then those break off into further subsections beneath. So under finance, we have payroll, we have accounts payable, and break things down from there. So this structure works quite well for many organizations and many portals in the system, especially businesses that are focusing on compliance and training internal users, staff. Then that's a good one to go with, and management can report on their staff using that structure. Another structure we see quite often is the intercompany regional structure. So for larger global businesses that have locations across the world, different offices, things like that, we can use the location structure, the regional method to formulate our department structure. So, and you can actually combine those two structures as well. You could have a top level regional structure that then boils down into a more corporate structure under that. But in this case, we've got the main headquarters as the top level department, and then we break that down into regions: East, West, Asia Pacific, Europe, and we have some subsidiaries beneath the West department there. So this one, in this case, we can focus on larger multi-location businesses, and managers can manage their staff perhaps by location. So another structure we can have here is the client reseller structure. So quite often we'll have clients who are selling content or training external users, channel partners, that kind of thing. And so in that case, we can break out departments into companies. So within the overarching department of a company, we can then have different tiers perhaps that we want to segment our clients into, or we can have clients underneath those tiers, however you'd like to slice and dice that, but that's the example we used here. We have 4 tiers and then a couple of clients branching out from there. So those are some examples of how you can set up your department structure. Definitely something to give some thought to as one of the fundamental parts of setting up your portal to best serve your LMS users. Next up, we'll take a look at groups. Groups is one of the other ways we can slice and dice our users in the system. So a little different from departments though. Groups, they don't have that parent-child relationship. So groups are just purely a horizontal structure. You have groups that go across the organization, and that's that. They're one level deep. They are useful for performing bulk actions and admin management. So we tend to recommend using groups to create things that reach across departments. So you can have users from various departments, for example, a group of admins or managers, and group them together that way to perform various actions. Another thing to keep in mind about groups is that they are a bit more limited in their reporting versus departments. So not all the reports contain a group filter or group column. One of the nice things about groups is that we can create them automatically. Oh, that's nice. So basically using the rules engine, which I'm sure you're familiar with, same as how we set up access to courses and various other things in the system, we can create a set of rules that will automatically create a group of users. So when we set that behavior to automatic, the familiar rule boxes will pop up, and we can add as many fields and criteria as we want to refine that rule. So in this case, in the screenshot here, we've decided that we're going to make a group of all our people that have a job title that contains the word manager. Real simple. So in this case, we're illustrating here that these people all belong to different departments necessarily, and so the group structure reaches across that department structure, as I mentioned. So groups can pull people together and group them together from different departments. So in this case, we've got Patty, Quentin, Carol. They're in different departments, different places, but they all have that same criteria that we set up for the automatic rules. They have manager in their job title, so they're going to go in and populate that manager group, and we can do stuff with them together. Of course, you can also create a group manually. So if there's no way to group users together, there's no common attribute or field that is between them, then you can create a group manually and just add users to it. And that'll be useful if you have smaller specialized groups, like a task force of some kind, perhaps. I'm not sure what you might want to do there. So here's how that works, just the good old search functionality. You can search through your users and add them to the group manually. So here's where we get into the fun stuff. How do we use departments and groups together? Because we can. So this shows a fairly common structure. We've got a couple departments and we've got the parent-child structure with some users in these various departments. But the cool thing is that we can have users belonging to only one department, but we can have common users from either department belonging to that group. So in this case, both Sally and Patty, even though they're in different departments, they can belong to Group B, HSE, and same with Group A, Irvine and Larry belong to Group A manager. And in Sally's case, she actually belongs to both groups. So she can belong to more than one group, even though she can only belong to one department. So a little bit about user management, and this is how your admins can determine, well, you can determine who they can see in the system. So which users are they going to have access to in reporting, which users can they enroll in courses and perform actions on, depending on how you've set up their access and their role. And this is another component that'll determine what they can do as an admin. So with user management, a user can manage departments or a group. So not both, you have to pick one or the other. And that'll, as I mentioned, control their ability to view users in the system as well as their reporting results. So they'll only see users they have access to in the reports. So a couple options when we're setting this up here. Department admins, they can manage multiple departments. So you can give an admin access over multiple departments and the users within it. A department can also have multiple admins, so that's fine. And then we have a bit of flexibility as well that the admin rights can include a department and its subdepartments if we want. So that parent-child relationship is also a part of this department admin functionality. So we can have them administrate just that one department that we set, or we can include the children underneath. So this is how it looks in the LMS when you set a user to be an admin. You'll shortly thereafter want to set up their user management. That's a required field here. So basically in this case, we've decided that we're giving this person department access and we've given them department and sub-department access to the sample users department. Here, conversely, we've said they can only have access to the sample users department, not any of the child departments underneath that. We can also give admin access to groups. So a group admin, he or she can manage one group only. So unlike departments, we can't select various departments. It has to be one group, but a group can have multiple admins. And that handy cross-reaching functionality I keep alluding to, the users in the group can be pulled from multiple departments. So this overreaches the parent-child relationship. And how that works, really simple. We just select group here back in the LMS, so back in the admin settings, and we can set the user management to group and choose the group that we want this admin to have user management access to. So here's a little example. We've created some automatic groups based on the learner's manager, rather. So we used a custom field to identify who the manager is. In this case, Jim and Susan are managers. And so we created automatic groups for them. And this automatically pulls in all their staff. So you can see by the color coding here, Bob and Jason, they report to Jim. They're going to go in his group. Joanne, Timothy, Jack, and Aaron, they report to Susan, so they're going to be pulled automatically into Susan's group. And then the nice thing is we can give user management access to Jim and Susan. They get access to their group, and easy peasy. So that's a little bit about the user management and how we could potentially set up some reporting manager functionality using groups. Here's a little checklist, if you will, of some of the pros and cons of departments versus groups, or which features one has versus the other. So departments and groups both allow for multiple admins. However, learners can only be included in multiple groups. They can only belong to one department at a time. Admins can only manage one group though, but they can manage multiple departments. Both options can be set up and populated via an integration, so like a CSV sync, save some administrative burden if you'd like there. However, only departments can be set up and populated via the RESTful API currently. Whereas only groups currently have the handy-dandy automatic rule population functionality. So, bit of a checklist that you can look over there when you're setting up your structure in case you need one of those features. So next up, we're going to take a look at some user management examples, how we might set things up in a real-world scenario. So in this case here, we've got Alice. She's a learner in the organization. She works in the accounting department. She reports to Bob, who's the manager of accounting. Accounting is part of the larger finance department, which is managed by both Diane and Emily. And then finally, the finance department in turn reports to Frank, the VP of Finance. So I'm going to take a risk here and jump over to the LMS and see if I can show you how it looks in the actual system here, just for funsies. Okay, so far so good. So we're in the LMS now, and I'll show you how that looks. I just thought it was a little bit nicer to see how it actually looks in the LMS. So in that example, we're going to put Alice into her department. She already is, but we can just take a look, see how that would work. So we want Alice to be in the accounting department, so we're going to edit Alice as a user and select the accounting department from the drop-down here. Handy search function as well, of course. If you have tons of departments, you don't have to scroll through the whole thing. You can search for the one. And so that's good. Alice belongs to accounting. That is what we want. And then I'm going to show you another example here. I just want to show you what Bob's access looks like. So Bob's the accounting manager, if you'll recall. So he's going to be Alice's manager. Bob also belongs to the accounting department himself. So in this case, we're going to edit Bob's account, and we're going to go to the account tab. That's where the admin functionality is found. And we're going to set up his user management. So once we toggle that admin function on, I'm going to go to department. We're going to set his user management to accounting. Simple as that. So it'll tell you here which users belong to that department. In this case, it's only a couple, Alice and Bob. And Bob will now be able to see Alice in the various reports and perform functionality on her based on his role, of course, in the system as to what access he has. So that worked. So I'll pop back to my PowerPoint here. And this just walks us through how that works for what we just did. I skipped a couple of steps, but that's okay. You get the idea. And then the result would be this example here. So we set up just the first part of it, Alice being the learner. She belongs to accounting. Bob is the manager, the admin. He also belongs to accounting, but has admin access to Alice. So similarly, it would be to set it up all the way up the chain. Diane and Emily would be in the finance group. They would have admin user access over accounting, and so on and so forth up the chain. So another scenario here, and in this case, we're going to use the groups functionality. So in this case, Georgina is the CEO, and she wants to report on the executive team. So she doesn't necessarily want to see the whole entire department structure. She just wants to look at her executive team, and so we're going to use a group in this case. So let's pop to the LMS. In this case, I'm going to go to groups. Let's create a new group. Call it executives. And then we're going to add some rules. So how are we going to inform this group creation with attributes that we can find in the system? So in this case, we've got a number of fields that we can use, but we're going to use job title. And let's say VP. And that'll update our criteria. In this case, we get 2 users. So really easy. We can continue refining that rule. As you know, you can do and rules, or you can do or rules, however you want to set that up. So for our purposes, we'd probably do or, and since we want to pull people who are VPs or CTOs, how about them? And then that dynamically updates the number of people that match that user. So now we've got 3 users in our group so far. So if we hit save, that would create that group with those users. And then for Georgina, we would set her user management much similarly. So we would go back to her account and set her user management to the group instead of the department, since we created that handy little executive group, and that's the one we would choose. And then Georgina would have admin access to her executive team. And there's that. Now we'll take a look at some smiley face best practices, a few of our ideas on how you might want to do things. When should I use a department or group instead of a custom field to represent something? So there's many ways you can represent data in the LMS. Custom fields is one of them. And they're not always appropriate. If you need to set an admin to manage a set of users based on that criteria, then you might want to use department instead of a custom field or attribute for that. You can use custom fields for many things as well. Many times people ask, should I organize by a group or a department? Well, here's some questions to ask yourself if you're facing that conundrum. How do you need to report on the data? If you need it in a lot of reports, you might want to use a department. Do you require hierarchical management? So that parent-child relationship, if you do, probably going to use a department in that case. Groups don't have that. Are there multiple admins? Do they manage multiple subsets of users? So in this case, groups are good. They can reach across departments, so you don't have to have just a single type of user or subset of users. Do you need to share the reports? So we can actually share reports using groups as well. So that's another handy dandy feature of groups. Groups very useful for a lot of the admin functionalities. How should I name my departments? Well, pick a name that works for your admins. Keep things nice and clear and concise. Keep things stable and predictable so that hopefully they're not changing all the time. We don't suggest creating departments based on a supervisor name, although some clients do things that way. And hey, that's okay too, but not a typical use case at any rate. Okay, last couple of things we'll just talk about here, a little bit of the integration options. So as we showed, it's fairly easy to create groups automatically and assign people to departments and things, but oftentimes we want to get rid of that admin burden so we can create and update departments and groups via various integration methods to make things more automated and easier for you, hopefully. Some of those options are scheduled data syncs, so we can import and export things via CSV files, FTP uploads, that type of thing. We've also got our RESTful API, so that allows you to create programs to access Absorb functionality in real time. So if a user was registered and created on your portal, for instance, you could have a RESTful API call, create them in the LMS right then and there. We also have out-of-the-box integrations with Salesforce and Bamboo HR currently. A lot of people use those apps. We have more coming up, but those are the ones we have for now. So that can automate some of the department creation, user creation, and the user management process for you as well. So if you have any questions about any of those, feel free to contact your CSM.